Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, August 2nd, 2018. Time for another live show. Welcome, everybody who might be listening down at Netroots Nation 2018 in New Orleans. If you're awake, it's a little early for you, I guess. I mean, if you're out reveling all night long, although it's still only Thursday. You're not supposed to really get started until the weekend, but, people are breaking those rules all the time. Everything appears to be, okay, off to another shaky start here in the morning. Getting towards the end of the summer and getting nervous about sending the kids back to school and what that means for our schedule here. But, we tend to run better. We run like a top. What was the old Trump phrase? A fine-tuned machine, at least when the kids are in school. Summer's always a little bit shaky, but we do have some of the regular features for you today. Of course, it being Thursday, Greg Dworkin already preparing his raft o' stories to float away on a raft o' stories. Plenty to go over today. Lots of fun and shocking and interesting news. Computers just getting around to the idea that they might have to cooperate for the rest of the day. It might work to broadcast for the rest of the day. How's it going down there? Maybe we'll hear from Armando, who is on scene. You should all mob him and ask for autographs. Be sure to do that probably early in the morning. Good idea. We'll tell you his hotel room number sometime in the second hour. Be the 10th caller, and I'll reveal his hotel room number. And I'm not sure what you're going to do with that information. However, like I said, plenty of stories coming up. We'll take a look through Pocket, see what we've put aside, etc., and try and get you a more or less coherent show for you at some point during today's broadcast. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm being distracted by disturbing pictures on the interwebs via Twitter. But if you want to send us your own disturbing picture, or hey, if you're taking snaps while you're wandering around Netroots Nation at some time, we'd love to have those. Remember the KITM, Kagro in the Morning, hashtag that you can append to it, and I believe you'll only be disturbing 2 or 3 other users of the same hashtag who occasionally pop up and remind us that they are out there too. And they don't mind. They love getting our photos and just smile nicely, and no one gets upset about party goers circulating pictures on the internet. I think there's nothing wrong with that. All right, let's see what's up in Pocket. No one story dominating the Twitter wires today as far as I can see. But, plenty of things going on and plenty of stories to round up. Let's see what, maybe there are a few things that we set aside via the interwebs and Twitter this morning. I'm kind of sort of taking a look around. No one dominant story, though. Lots of discussion about Paul Manafort's bizarro wardrobe. I do remind you, though, he was partners for a long time in a consulting business with Roger Stone, who himself has a bit of a bizarro wardrobe. I guess that's what these guys kind of did with their money. That's like apparently a point of controversy. The judge in the Manafort case getting a little bit irritated, apparently, with the proclivity of the prosecutors in citing his vast and obscene wealth and what he did with it, both, I guess, the clothes horse thing and clothes ostrich thing, I suppose, if you wanted to go that way. And the constant reference to his work for Russian and former Soviet oligarchs. And for whatever reason, the judge doesn't want the word oligarchs used in the courtroom anymore. And I'm not 100% certain what he thinks he's buying with that, but that's, all right. Well, I think we can probably abide by that. More news, or more digestion of the news about the QAnon conspiracies and every stupid thing that goes along with it. Speaking of, I guess, things that came across the Twitter trend, some random stories You know how we like to inject those things in there. Not anything affecting the national news, although I always feel like sometimes these things should be national news. Gun fail issues. I mean, part of my purpose in life for the past couple of years has been boosting them into the national spotlight. I happen to have shared with me last night a report. Let's see if I can find that one. Here we are. Came through to me from Rob D, who tweets as, SS Resident. We imagine that's not either Secret Service or the Nazi SS. I doubt that very much. But anyway, SS Resident, you can tell us what that actually means. And, I'll smack my head and say, duh, of course that's where you live. And it's probably even in his profile. No? All right. Well, anyhow. Yes, it is. South Shore. There we are. South Shore resident is a lot more pleasant than SS, Nazi SS resident. Anyway, he sent me this story with the comment, at an officer's funeral, no less. The headline here from the Patriot Ledger, and where are we? Patriot Ledger, up in New England. 2 police officers injured in accidental shooting at Chestnut funeral. What's going on here? The news is, why would I be able to read you this? I have to answer a survey. You want to answer this survey with me? It's an open-ended question. What would you name a coalition that works with the government to find solutions to sea level rise and flooding from high tides and rainfall? What kind of survey question is that? I feel like I should give them a good answer because I don't want to damage their efforts, but I would call it a huge annoyance when I want to read an article. Coalition. I'll call it that. And, we'll submit that. All right. Braintree. Oh, that's a great place. Who's been fascinated by the name and wondered how they came up with it. So I guess we are Braintree, Massachusetts. Is there another Braintree? I'd love to. We should all eat the fruit of the Braintree. A shot fired when a Rhode Island police sergeant, you Rhode Islanders, police sergeant dropped his gun. Where did he drop his gun? He dropped his gun at a police funeral. It didn't cause another police funeral. Don't get excited about that. But shot fired when a Rhode Island police sergeant dropped his gun, which also, remember, they don't fire when you drop them. Injured 2 police officers. That guy's shot 2 cops. What are we going to do with this? Injured 2 police officers following a funeral tribute to a fallen Weymouth police sergeant. I'm guessing that I have the pronunciation close to right on Weymouth. The incident took place at a staging area not far from where Weymouth Police Sergeant Michael Chestnut was laid to rest in Blue Hills Cemetery on July 20th. It is accidental, Braintree Police Chief Paul Shastany said of the shooting. Cranston Police Sergeant Michael Patnaud, member of the department's honor guard, was removing his department-issued .40 caliber Glock 22 from the holster of his honor guard uniform. See, transitions, officials said. The gun fell out of the holster and fired when Patnaud attempted to catch it. And that is almost always the explanation of how those guns that don't fire when dropped, fire when dropped. There are still a couple of models of guns out there. Occasionally revolvers, certainly Derringers, etc., do fire when they hit the ground. But a lot of times you find that people drop it and then they try to catch it. And guess how they catch it? Right through the trigger guard. You might ask, why bring a loaded .40 caliber Glock to a funeral? Of course, he's in his honor guard uniform. You might ask, why load the weapon that goes in your honor guard uniform? Well, the answer is it was his department-issued sidearm. You might ask, why bring your department-issued sidearm loaded to a funeral as part of your honor guard uniform? And the answer is, shut up, you're under arrest, basically. Or I need you to calm down, sir. Anyway, I just brought that up because it was kind of a stupid story and just another example of how even people who are supposed to know what they're doing with guns occasionally accidentally do stuff like shoot 2 cops or whatever. And the real reason I brought it up, though, was because it gave me the opportunity to showcase my gun fail memory, and I was pleased to be able to bring people this news lesson. This is actually the third time I have seen a police officer accidentally discharge a weapon at a police funeral. I am not kidding. There are two other incidents that I know of off the top of my head, and there's probably more out there. We had one in Indianapolis, I think probably just last year, an IMPD officer's gun that discharged at the funeral of Lieutenant Aaron Allen back in, August, about this time last year. Gunshots discharged inside Bankers Life Fieldhouse at the funeral of Southport Lieutenant Aaron Allen. And there's more going back. This one was back in New Jersey, as I recall, and it might have been about 2015. Bergen Sheriff's officer's gun discharges at Cliffside Park officer's funeral, his wake, back in January of 2015. So I just thought interesting, sort of trend line there. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does. It happens enough that I can remember two other times off the top of my head in the last few years. And if anybody's wondering why it is, would you like the explanation? The reason that guns get accidentally discharged, with enough frequency at police funerals that you can have 3 incidents this stupid in the last couple of years is there are guns there. That's all the answer there really is. That's all the answer you really need. Wherever you mass up a bunch of guns, there's going to be a gun accident. And true to form, even at the funeral, honestly, at some point you're going to be at the funeral of a cop who was shot to death on the job, and somebody's going to accidentally fire shots. And I guess now we just wait for the day when somebody accidentally fires shots at a police funeral and other police draw their weapons and shoot that cop, thinking it's an attack. It's not far-fetched. It's probably going to happen within our lifetimes. Anyway, I've kept Greg waiting patiently did you enjoy the magazines while you were waiting, Greg?
Yeah, I did the puzzle. It was really cool.
I get a lot of requests to keep doctors waiting.
It's about only fair play.
Right.
Turnabout and all of that.
Good morning.
Did you cover the
No.
prosecutor's dilemma about whether to charge adults when a child in the home steals their gun and uses it for shooting?
I have in the past. Not today, but
August 1st,
could.
2018, there's this great story in the Washington Post by John Woodrow Cox and Stephen Rich. And the title is, "The Gun's Not in the Closet." That's a quote. And since 1999, children have committed at least 145 school shootings. Among the 105 cases where the weapon source was identified, 80% were taken from the child's home or those of relatives or friends. But the Washington Post found that only 4 adults have been convicted for failing to lock up the guns. Now, after a deadly school shooting in Kentucky, a prosecutor must decide, should the parent who owned the weapon be charged? Now, there are these things called gun safes. They can be opened quickly. If you have a revolver, for example, a handgun in your home, and you use it for safety, you can get to it in like 3 seconds, say the experts.
Yep.
With a gun safe. So you can keep it away from kids, for example. But, of course, you know better than anybody, there's many examples of people leaving guns around, loaded, cocked, all the things you're not supposed to do, and, people get injured and or killed from it. So
yes,
it's really quite an interesting story. And of course, the best part is the prosecutor with the dilemma saying, gee, if I go after this guy who let his kid get his gun because he didn't lock it up properly, people won't like me.
Right.
It'll be unpopular.
Yeah, because they also leave their guns accessible, and it's their right, damn it. So, it's true. A lot of places consider it to be, a lot of people consider it to be an anti-gun stance to require that guns be locked up. People are extraordinarily lazy about their guns. I even have stories off the top of my head of guns stolen from being leaned up against gun safes. I'm too lazy to open it and put it in there. I brought it all the way to the gun safe, but I just laid it down right next to it and said, could be something on TV.
Right,
maybe
and
dies,
this
maybe not.
Gives you an idea of the way the discussion gets skewed. If you look at it as a public safety, public health issue, you're going to investigate all the issues. The Post says discussions about how to curb shootings in American schools have centered on arming teachers or improving mental health treatment. Always a good idea. Banning military-style rifles. I don't have a problem with that, if you can define it, which is hard. Or strengthening background checks. But if kids as young as 6 didn't have access to guns, the Post findings show 2/3 of school shootings over the past 2 decades couldn't have happened.
Oh.
That sounds like it's significant.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know how it is with criminal kids. They'll always get guns, no matter what you turn to.
I know. They have criminal gangs. I think it's like MS2.
Yeah, right.
And they go out and they trade it on the playground for bubble gum and packs of cards.
Yep.
I didn't want to miss that one. But, there is a lot else going on. It's a good article. I left it for you at the end of the list there. Maybe you want to look at it later.
Okay.
Or even tomorrow. But there is a lot going on. Today is more of the Manafort trial. By the way, before I forget, the Pope says the death penalty is no-go now.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Pope.
He just ruled,
You mean just for Manafort or?
No, for everybody.
Oh.
Like it's never acceptable.
All right. I mean,
that's a big change.
Yeah, that's that's nice. Okay, so we'll see what kind of effect that has. How many divisions does he have, or whatever?
Well, don't argue with him.
Okay, he's
this Manafort thing is interesting in a lot of different levels, and we could spend a whole show or maybe 2 on that. For example, why is the judge being such a hard ass about a lot of this? Well, apparently he's got a reputation for doing that anyway, but part of the prosecutor's job is to get the jury to convict this guy.
That's a lot of his job.
And what is he guilty of? He's guilty of financial crimes, they say. That's why he's on trial. All right, bear with me here. Financial crimes are boring. There's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of emails, and this and that and everything else. So the prosecutor says, it's boring.
Yeah.
How about we do fashion instead? Instead of just saying, he took a lot of money from people he shouldn't have taken money from, how about we show the jury, who probably can't afford this stuff, exactly how much money he spent on these frivolous things, and make sure that they fully understand that he's part of the 1% that they are not part of. And we, the prosecutors, think that that'll make it a much more interesting case, and, by the way, more likely to convict.
Yeah.
And the judge says, I see through that. You can do it a little bit, but don't go overboard on it. Well, what about this ostrich jacket? Now, it's the ostrich skin, not the feathers. It's a leather jacket. What about this snakeskin jacket with 3/4 sleeves? Well, it's humid in Moscow. You need 3/4 sleeves.
That is a little unusual.
Right? But they keep, focusing on it. What about the fact that he spent over $900,000 on suits in the past 3 or 4 years? Well, do you know how much it costs to get suits dry cleaned? Of course, you got to have new stuff made. I mean, so they're trying to make it interesting. And that's part of the reason why there's so much fashion. But today, the finances are going to be on display. So they had that, let's get the jury interested. Now that they're interested in paying attention, let's tell you where you got the money from. That's today's presentation. That's how I read it. Of course, I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on the radio. But my layman's look, in terms of who the prosecutors are talking to, it's the regular folks on the jury.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know that they needed to exclude all that. And of course, sometimes the
judge doesn't want the trial to go for like 6 weeks. They call this circuit the rocket docket because everything gets done really fast.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I like to keep it moving. I mean, I think it's relevant, obviously, that the case is about money laundering, and here's what he's doing with the money and how he's laundering
it. Be, let's start with clothes. Let's instruct the jury about laundering, and then we'll get to the money part.
That's right. I told you this was about laundry.
You got to do this in a logical fashion. You know what I'm saying here?
No one likes these chores. I'm just saying. That's what it's about. And of course, sometimes the play is, oh, look at all this ridiculous, ostentatious clothing. This is not a normal person. And the judge says, you guys need to ignore that when you make your decisions. And the prosecutor says, yeah, right, ignore it.
Ignore the pictures I just showed you of the ostrich jacket.
Remember,
and the
don't
snakeskin
include
coat.
This in your thinking.
It's okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. The judge is right. Just pretend you never saw that stuff.
Right. So, okay. And I'm not certain why you can't say oligarchs, except that maybe no one knows what that means.
Well, I don't know. Maybe that, or maybe, again, they're trying to present him as being part of the 1%. And the judge is saying, forget about the character assassination. Get to the point here.
Okay. Well, part of the reason he's part of the 1% is he's amassed such enormous amounts of money. Okay. Well, all right. We'll see how it goes. I don't think it's necessary to the case, and now we all know. And so we all get out of jury duty on the next retrial.
Right. But that's the cable news, tabloid view of the trial.
Oh, yeah. I hate that. Yeah.
Then there's the step back and look at it from 20,000 feet look at the trial. And even here, you can go small or you can go big. Which way you want to go?
Big.
Big. All right. Franklin Ford today in the Atlantic.
That's
this
huge.
Is so much bigger than Paul Manafort. Good that you chose big.
All right.
With Donald Trump's former campaign chairman on trial, America is reckoning with its very serious kleptocracy problem.
Don't say
and
that.
What Ford does is he puts together Manafort stealing everything he can, and he couples it with Steve Mnuchin stealing everything he can.
Oh, yeah.
That's why it's big.
Okay.
Right? On the eve of the Paul Manafort trial, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin casually announced that Donald Trump's administration was considering a fresh $100 billion tax cut for the wealthy.
Yeah.
The two events, the trial and the tax cut, should be considered plot points in the same narrative. Manafort had grown very rich by looting public monies, and Mnuchin was proposing an arguably legal version of the same thing.
Yes. Well, arguably. I mean, you lose the argument, but okay.
Well, this is a very nice treatment of gimmitarianism.
Yes. Okay. Fine.
Unlike past, like the prosecutor's trying to get the jury interested by talking about fashion. I'm going to get David interested by talking about gimmitarianism, even though he doesn't mention the term. It's really where he's going with this.
I got it.
Now that I got David's
I like that. Right. I'm right. Keep going.
You see? Unlike past Trump tax cuts. I should try that with Armando sometime. Unlike past Trump tax cuts, this proposed cut would be implemented by executive fiat without a congressional vote, a highly unusual and highly undemocratic act of plunder that would redirect money from the state to further enrich the American elite, not to mention Mnuchin himself. The trial of Manafort is not merely an episode in a larger scandal that will unfold over many chapters. It's a warning not to be ignored. It's an occasion for the U.S. to awaken from its collective slumber about the creeping dangers of kleptocracy.
Creeping
kleptocracy.
Yeah.
So much about America's view of itself resists accepting a disturbing reality. Conventional wisdom long held Americans' free market would never tolerate the sort of clientism, nepotism, and outright theft that prevailed in places like Brazil and Italy.
Oh.
Americans thought that globalization would export the hygienic habits of this nation's financial system and its values of good government to the rest of the world.
What?
But over the past 3 decades, the opposite happened.
Okay. I mean, that's
America
very
has become the sanctuary of choice for laundered money, bastion of shell companies, and anonymously purchased real estate. Who does that remind you of? American elites have learned to plant money offshore with acumen that comes close to matching their crooked counterparts abroad.
Crooked.
So Manafort is one of the architects of this New World Order and talks about his activities in the 80s and 90s and how he got real good at working with the oligarchs, that word that you're not allowed to use at the trial.
Pollywogs.
Right? And Manafort was the most important enabler of all of the people who was doing this. What's increasingly clear is that Manafort also attempted to exploit the Trump campaign with similarly kleptocratic aims. Take the story of Stephen Kalk.
All right.
Stephen Kalk emerged in the course of Mueller's pretrial filings. Kalk owns a small Chicago bank. In the summer of 2016, Manafort applied for a loan. The claims of Manafort loan applications were shaky. According to Mueller, bank officials were quite adamant in expressing their reservations about Manafort's application, but there was apparently a backstory these officials didn't know. Kalk had won a place on Trump's board of economic advisors, one of 13. Mueller's lawyers have said they plan to prove that Kalk landed this title only after promising Manafort loans. So even as Manafort departed the campaign and widespread allegations of misdeeds, Kalk extended him loan after loan, $16 million in total, and represented 22% of the bank's total equity.
Ooh, boy. All right.
Right? This small tale is just one instance of a larger genre repeated across this administration. The hints that foreign countries are financing deals that profit the president's own family. The long list of officials, see Scott Pruitt, Tom Price, abusing the perquisites of office, and those stories are just a subset of an even larger narrative still of an American elite increasingly at home in the ranks of international kleptocracy. Thanks to Robert Mueller, that racket is now on trial. So that's what the Manafort trial is all about.
Excellent. And
I thought that was
Mueller
really
is
quite
experienced good in that. Yeah. I mean,
did you? I mean, giving like a fifth of the bank's assets to a single person on the basis of you give me a board appointment that I want to put on my resume?
And what a person to give it to. I mean, if it was somebody who would pay it back, I mean, you'd have a chance. But he's giving away a fifth of the bank's total equity to somebody with no intention to pay back, let alone ability to pay back. And, well, Mueller has some experience in that. And, he probably thought, well, maybe he didn't think it was an unrelated issue when he launched the big case that cracked the corruption at FIFA.
Yeah. So in the minute we have before the break, let me just also take a smaller, but still big. And that's this New York Times article looking at the trial.
Oh, they're always small, yes.
Well, compared to kleptocracy and international. The mandate given to Robert S. Mueller III, Bobby Threesty, and his team was broad to investigate not just Russian election interference, but also any related crimes that may unearth. So when this group of seasoned prosecutors began rooting around Washington, they pounced on a ripe target. Lobbyists taking millions of dollars from foreign governments.
Yes.
So this isn't about the kleptocracy writ large. This is about lobbyists and foreign governments in our capital.
Yeah.
Right. As the break comes up, I'm just going to leave you with one name.
All right.
Advine.
What? Who? Okay. Well, we'll come back in just 2 minutes and investigate that then. Well, it is rather amazing. I love how we try to squeeze something in from the New York Times, but half the time gets spent saying Robert S. Mueller III, who's the special prosecutor. Oh, my God. All right. Well, we'll be back in 2. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's take a look around. Let's find out about the single name that we heard a little bit about from the New York Times. I see, unfortunately, another gun fail story now circulating. Another person who thought it was a great idea to help out a person being attacked by a dog to shoot the dog. Seems like a really difficult trick to pull off.
Shoot the dog, but not the person being attacked?
Yeah. Shooting any part of that mess.
No. Was he part of a well-regulated militia?
No. The dog might have been, but no longer. Dog's injured. Bullet passed through the dog and hits the man in the leg. It's the basic story here. So, no. I assume he recovers, but, it's no joke to get hit into anything.
No harm, no foul, except for being shot.
Right, I guess so. Well, you're right. It happened in Kentucky, so what's going to happen. The prosecutor's in it. He's got a dilemma.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what to do.
Because if he prosecutes the dog, people are going to be really unhappy with him.
They love dogs down there, so he's not really sure how he's going to handle this one. But if you see a person getting attacked by a dog, man, you can't just take care of that from across the street. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So, all right, where were we?
So we're about to talk about something called FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're going to lobby, you have to register as a foreign agent. If you don't, you're in trouble. And this Times article points out, in addition to Mr. Manafort, the recent cases include the special counsel's indictments against Russians who disseminated stolen information, yada, yada. Also among them is the complaint against Maria Butina, the Russian accused of acting as a foreign agent. Mm-hmm. And even the case of Michael Flynn, Mr. Trump's former national security advisor, included allegations he had lied to investigators about lobbying work he was doing on behalf of the Turkish government. Mm-hmm. Right? So a lot of this stuff is like, well, I can get a big payday because these foreign people will pay me a lot of money on their behalf. And so, fine, let's just go ahead and do it. The first days of Mr. Manafort's trial offered exhibit after exhibit of this lavish world, beginning with his extravagant purchases, including cars, Persian rugs, and expensive clothes. It also revealed bipartisan largesse. One 2014 email presented in court on Tuesday showed the Democratic consultant Thomas A. Devine proposing a day rate of $10,000 to do work in Ukraine on behalf of Mr. Yanukovych, the Russian-aligned former president who was a longtime client of Mr. Manafort. You'd need to make the travel arrangements and transfer the $50,000 before the trip, Devine wrote to Rick Gates, Mr. Manafort's partner. If you want me to come on Monday and leave Thursday, it'll be $40,000. Mr. Devine, who's known as Tad, you got to put that in the story, went on to become the chief strategist for the presidential campaign of Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a self-proclaimed Democratic socialist.
Well, that's good. It's nice thing to do.
But it's bipartisan. They list other people who here. None have been charged with any crimes. Mr. Mueller's referral of those cases several months ago to federal prosecutors in New York was revealed in news reports on Tuesday. One involves Gregory B. Craig, who served in the White House counsel under President Obama, before leaving to work for the law firm Skadden, Arp, Slate, Maker, and Flom. Can't make this up. Tony Podesta, an influential Washington lobbyist whose brother John Podesta was chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Got to get Clinton's name in there, right? Right. And former Representative Vin Weber, Republican of Minnesota, who joined the lobbying firm Mercury Public Affairs after leaving Congress.
Yes.
Mercury Public Affairs is going to be in the middle of this stuff.
Vin Weber, not just any member of Congress, by the way, but a high-ranking Republican leader, extraordinarily influential on Newt Gingrich, etc.
Yep. So Devine's name comes up, and Dana Milbank has a column here entitled "The Deep Cynicism of Bernie Sanders' Chief Strategist."
Oh dear!
Because it was like, what's Devine doing in this?
That is a little weird.
And actually, Devine was defending Manafort, saying he's a good guy, and I'm thinking, what is that all about?
Come on.
Tad Devine, during his run as chief strategist of Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, railed against the corrupting influence of money in politics. He repeatedly echoed the Sanders message that our economy is rigged, special interests by politicians, all of the new wealth is going to the top of America, and there's a corrupt system of campaign finance, whereas Sanders supports the little guy. Those who heard Devine's interviews and watched his Sanders TV ads, therefore, may be surprised to know that in the years and months leading up to that, Devine was making gobs of money to secure the election of one of the world's most corrupt political figures and then his allies. Thanks to Robert S. Mueller's prosecution, Robert S. Mueller III's prosecution of Paul Manafort. I guess they have infinite amount of column space there. The former Trump campaign chairman and sometimes business associate of Devine, we now have an unusual glimpse into the role the Democratic ad man had in electing and preserving the power of Ukraine's Viktor Yanukovych, a crooked pro-Putin autocrat. Though American political consultants routinely rake in cash from foreign leaders, even shady ones, Devine's seamless pivot from advocate for anti-democratic thug to champion of a principled democratic reformer shows extraordinary flexibility.
Okay.
Right? As Sanders likes to say, let me be clear. Manafort is the one on trial for money laundering and other crimes. Devine's a witness. He's a witness for the prosecution. As prosecutors pointed out when he testified Tuesday, he wasn't the one with a bank account in Cyprus. There's no hint Devine did anything illegal, only cynical.
Okay. Sure.
Right? Manafort, who worked for the world's sleazebags, made no pretense of scruples. Devine, though an employee, declined to comment Wednesday. Devine wrote with Manafort a January 2006 memo when Russia was cutting off gas supplies to Ukraine, showing Yanukovych how to ride his good neighbor policy toward Russia to victory. He became prime minister. Devine drafted a presidential victory speech for Yanukovych in February 2010. By April 2012, Yanukovych had jailed his opponent and become an international pariah. Devine told Gates, that's Rick Gates, not Bill Gates, I regret we will not be able to work with you on Ukraine's parliamentary elections. But 4 months later, Devine wrote a strategy memo for Manafort. The number of people who admit they're having difficulty feeding their family through the Ukraine today is stunning, urging Yanukovych to signal his concern and calling for his party to attack.
This guy was feeding his family through Ukraine.
Right. In March 2014, Devine sent Gates a $100,000 per month proposed agreement to work on the election in Ukraine. In court Tuesday, Devine said Gates had recruited him to work for the man who is now Ukraine's president, billionaire Petro Poroshenko, but Devine didn't wind up working on the project just as well. It was almost time for him to launch the anti-corruption campaign of Bernie Sanders.
Is this article in your list? I'm having difficulty finding it there. All right. Well, maybe you can pop it down
where
at the bottom.
is it?
I mean, I got to include this.
It says opinion, the deep cynicism.
Opinion, no wonder.
It's right below Mueller's digging exposes culture foreign lobbying, and right above Trump jumps to Ohio special.
Okay. There's a scowling
you got it?
Guy there. Yep, got it. Thank you. Okay.
Right. So both sides do it.
Devine.
Again, Devine's not the one on trial, but let's just say in politics, don't believe everything you hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what can you do? It's troubling, to say the least. I'll do the Susan Collins about it.
Yeah, deeply troubling.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's why between the kleptocracy, gimitarianism exposed in the trial, and the culture of both sides, I mean, Jim Messina and a whole bunch of the others. Immediately after Obama won, went to work for, European consulting gigs. And I'm just saying, there's a whole lot of money in it. There's a whole lot of cynicism, and these political consultants don't seem to believe in much of anything.
No,
except getting paid.
Yeah, and sometimes that doesn't even happen. Yet they do believe in it.
They do definitely believe in getting paid.
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of these guys view working in foreign elections as sort of like off-season activity.
Yeah, but you know what it is? It's a dot-com bubble, and they just want to jump in and get theirs until it's
I guess
burst.
so. They feel like they don't really have to investigate who are the people they're working for. If it's in a foreign country, like that's not going to affect
right, and if it's got enough
here.
zeros after it, who cares?
Yeah, a little bit akin to like the Hollywood stars who protect their image here but do ads in Japan for anything.
That kind of thing. Anyway, so that's the background in all of this, and one can be an idealist about policy and still be cynical about politics. It's perfectly okay and probably healthy if you look at it that way.
Yes, that's true, and you need to think about that. And the person who did not do this personally is Bernie Sanders, if you're worried about that.
And Tad Devine's not on trial.
That too.
He's not the one with the bank account. And
collusion's not even illegal, so
yeah,
I'll just throw that in there in case he does go
on trial.
Conspiracy
is.
Okay.
So anyway, all of this is happening and unfolding, and people are seeing this, and like the jury who's hearing about Manafort's wardrobe, people are absorbing all of this little by little as it filters through. Well, I'm not interested in politics, but you can't avoid seeing a story here and a story there. And so it does have an effect on the electorate. Now, we've got a special election coming up next week in Ohio 12th.
Ohio 12. Okay.
Danny O'Connor versus Troy Balderson. Troy Balderson's a Republican. Danny O'Connor's a Democrat. It's a Trump district.
Troy.
This should be
a
win for Republicans the way the Connor Lamb district was supposed to be a win for Republicans.
Oh, right.
This time, unlike in Connor Lamb, they got the candidate the Republicans did that they wanted.
Oh. Is that good for them this time? Because sometimes they want Nazis.
Here's the headline in Politico. Trump jumps into Ohio special election as GOP alarm grows. The president is heading to a suburban Columbus House district that Republicans until recently were widely expected to hold.
Right. So the
Republican loss coming after special election defeats in Pennsylvania and Alabama would be deeply deflating for the conservative base and party donors and provide more evidence a wave is building against them heading into the midterm. National Republicans have bombarded the suburban Columbus district with more than $3.3 million in TV ads in an effort to boost Balderson and attack his Democratic opponent Danny O'Connor ahead of the August 7th special election. They're battling to replace longtime GOP Representative Pat Tiberi, who resigned last fall. While Trump has so far focused his campaigning in conservative states, he stayed away from suburban areas, but now he's coming. Republican surrogates are flooding into the district. Vice President Mike Pence headlined a rally with Balderson on Monday. President's son Donald Trump Jr. recorded a robocall in support of him. Kasich, who formerly held this seat, started a TV commercial for him. Over the weekend, Balderson pointed to Trump and Kasich's endorsement as evidence he can unite the party.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Balderson's lagging in fundraising, and a new Monmouth poll out shows the race with Balderson up 44-43 when the previous poll had shown him up by 10.
Well, that is problematic.
Yeah. So it's a very close race. And the poll shows that the reason that Danny O'Connor is making up ground is the independents are breaking his way, not Balderson's way.
Okay.
And that's what we keep talking about in terms of, well, Trump's base is sticking with him. It doesn't matter. If you lose the independents, you lose elections. This is a perfect example, and I don't know how this is going to turn out. It's a toss-up. A toss-up means you don't know who's going to wind up winning. But at the same time, a wave means you win the close ones.
Or you certainly have a better chance of it. All right. I'm ready to... Well, how long do we have to wait to find out?
Tuesday, August 7th.
Then not very long at all. I think I can handle that.
Yep. So we'll know next week. When I do my Wednesday show, we'll talk about this.
All right.
And again, it's not an automatic win for O'Connor. He stumbled a little bit in some ways, but he's doing well in other ways. He's a good match for the district. That's the whole idea. He's a moderate. He's not. He doesn't support Nancy Pelosi, but he does say he'll accept whoever the Democrats vote for Speaker. And Republicans are trying to use that against him. But again, running against Nancy Pelosi is not a winning thing. They've tried it all year.
Decades.
In the special elections, and they keep losing.
All right.
So let's do it again. I mean, that's the logical thing, right?
That's what's in the box.
Okay. So you have that. Here's one, talking of polls, that I think is interesting. Women are planning to vote for Democrats in higher numbers than past midterms, according to CNN, with an article out today. They're talking about the June poll. Half of voters say they vote for Democratic candidate in the upcoming midterm elections, with 42% they vote for Republican. But when they went back and analyzed their own polls, they say that this is the highest and best that the Democrats have done on the generic ballot in the last 4 cycles.
All right. Way to go, generic.
Okay. The amount of people saying they'll vote for the Democratic candidate has increased by 5 points in total, by 1 point among men and 8 percentage points among women compared to 2014. And it's the highest the generic Democratic candidate has been in CNN polling at this point before a midterm in the past 4 midterm cycles. So they're looking just at their own polls.
Okay.
Right? The 2006 election was widely considered a wave election for the Democrats due to the substantial gains in Congress. They won majorities in the House and Senate, and their major wins in gubernatorial races that year. Polling at this point in 2006 showed 44% of voters said they'd vote for the Democratic candidate, and 36% planned to vote for Republicans, a 9-point advantage for the Democrats. And then the most recent CNN poll, Democrats have an 8-point advantage.
Okay.
Right? It's clear Democratic support has grown since the most recent midterms, with those who've said they'd vote for the generic Democratic candidate and those who've said they'd vote for the generic Republican candidate basically tied in 2014. So this is much better than 2014. And as they point out, it's all driven by women.
Oh.
It's hard to say whether women moving toward the Democratic Party is simply partisanship becoming more polarized, if they feel empowered by the amount of female candidates, or they don't even say, or if it's Trump. It's likely some combination.
Yes. Likely true.
So,
all right.
Yeah. So that's all out there too. And so wave is a wave is a wave. Now, how do Republicans respond to this?
Do they?
Well, you have Jim Jordan running for Speaker.
Okay, right. You have that lady giving the finger to the camera.
Him, right? Because he's accused of looking the other way for child abuse. Yeah. They lock up children in cages, some of whom die.
Right. That's big on the
That'll help moms.
Polls well.
Yeah. And then when that's not working and the tax cut doesn't work, then they're going to cut health care.
Yes, and cut taxes more.
So when that doesn't work, what do? I have an answer for you.
Is it ostrich jackets for everyone?
Cheat.
Oh, that's close.
The Virginian pilot. The Virginia paper, I suppose, right?
You certainly hope so. It is.
The Virginian pilot online. Scott Taylor's campaign paid staff to help get an independent opponent on the ballot. 4 of U.S. Representative Scott Taylor's paid campaign workers gathered more than half the signatures needed to assure Sean Brown a spot on the November ballot as she faces charges of defrauding the federal government. Brown, who had sought the Democratic nomination to challenge Taylor, is now running as an independent, seeking to represent the Williamsburg to Eastern Shore 2nd Congressional District. Norfolk business owner Elaine Luria is the Democratic candidate, and Taylor's staff, basically the paid staff, did the work to get Sean Brown on the ballot, presumptively to steal votes from the Democrats to assure that Scott Taylor wins.
I get it.
Right?
Yeah, that does happen from time to time. And
is that illegal? Or is it just collusion?
That might just be collusion. I don't even know. I mean, it would be illegal if they paid people to sign, but I don't think it's illegal to pay people to collect signatures. It's dirty. But I don't think we've ever bothered to make it illegal.
was aware of what the Forward Doing spokesman Weldon replied, of course he knew.
Yeah. Well, so
right.
that's
I did it. What are you going to do about it?
Nothing much.
Okay.
That happens quite a lot.
At the moment, Brown, the independent, is on trial anyway because she's trial on charges of defrauding the government by overstating the number of meals her nonprofit agency distributed under a federal summer program for young people, and that goes to a jury this week.
Oh, well, if she had done it in Puerto Rico, she'd have gotten away with it.
I suppose. In a court filing for the case, prosecutors said they have evidence Brown lied to an investigator while seeking funds for that agency and that she falsified campaign finance documents filed with the Federal Election Commission. So it's sleazy. What she did separately outside of the campaign might be illegal. She's on trial for that.
Yes.
And what this actually did in the campaign is not illegal, but it's awfully sleazy. It just reminded me of two other recent incidents. This one was April 30th, 2018. In the Daily Beast, fake Green Party candidate exposes having ties to Republican congressman. The man who pushed a fake Green Party candidate once interned for Representative Chris Collins. So Chris Collins up in New York had a fake Green Party guy running to help him get reelected.
Right.
This one is from AP, Helena, Montana, March 13, 2018. So they're relatively recent cases. A man who registered as a Green Party candidate for Montana's U.S. Senate race was on the state Republican Party's payroll and heads a newly formed anti-tax group, according to a review of election documents. So, people sometimes say to me, why are you so non-supportive of third parties?
Yeah.
And the answer is, I'm kind of suspicious of them. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I guess you have good reason to be. I mean, if they were tightly organized and didn't allow this to happen, then it would be more difficult to point to them as a chronic problem. But I guess, for a lot of people, they're like, well, we're going to lose anyway, so why bother going through the work of tightly organizing? And for others, the idea of, the parties they left were tightly organized and they didn't like the tight organization.
Yeah, because they lost.
Yeah.
So again, it just is a personal explanation. I grew up in New York. New York State has fusion tickets, so there's always third and fourth parties around.
Yeah.
People jockey to see who's going to get that separate line during the election.
Yes.
So you could be on the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party or the Reform Party or the Green Party or this party or that party. But generally what happens is the Democrat will run on, for example, on the Democrat and on the Liberal ticket.
Right.
And so you can vote for them either way, and then the votes are combined.
Yeah. And, that seems to work.
But the point is, who gets on those ballots is incredibly, let's say, transactional.
Yes.
It's a fancy way of saying corrupt, right?
Or a fancy way of saying tightly organized, I guess.
Right. So I grew up saying, look, I can vote for third parties, but I don't trust third parties because the system's rigged. Because it was. At the time I was growing up. Anyway.
And it
just was.
Anyways. Sure.
Then 2000 and Ralph Nader, and now these most recent examples I gave you. That's why I'm not a third party guy.
Yeah, well, if you ask yourself how much have any third party, take them all in aggregate, how much have third parties done to,
George Wallace?
do things or win elections or make a positive difference in who wins.
Ross Perot, he was a third party
guy. And I guess that's where people would point. Well, he was a third party candidate, and the upshot of it was Bill Clinton won, and a lot of people think that's a good idea.
It's a myth that will never die.
Oh, well, yeah, but people will point to it.
Because Perot took more votes away from George H.W. than he did Clinton.
Well,
and that's why Perot was running.
Initials,
he hated H.W., and that was part of the deal.
Yeah, well, well done. So, I mean, it won't stop it from getting pointed to, but doesn't mean it's correct. There's just not a great record of doing fantastic things.
So you say Ross Perot, and I say George Wallace, and you say Donald Trump and populism, and I say, well, yeah, right. So what's your point?
I don't know. Did I say those things? I probably did.
I'm just saying, it's out there. So
okay, now I know who's saying. You said I was
not swaying me to be a third party person, and there's just there's a lot of stuff there. So caveat emptor or caveat votor.
Votor. Okay. Or Voltron. How about that?
Something like that. Anyway, that's my summary for today, just to get you on track here. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. Hi to all our friends down in New Orleans for Netroots Nations. We're not there, but maybe next time. And I know Sirius XM is carrying it on one of their stations.
Yes.
I think 127, but I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other stations, including like Netroots Radio, that you can listen to and get the information from. And they probably have live feeds right there on the website. They normally do. So if you want to see some of these, that's a good place to look.
That's right. It's true. 127 on Sirius. I've been on that station, so it's very likely that's the one running things live. And there are live streams from other rooms. It's one of the things that goes on at Netroots Nation. There's 5, 10, 15 panels going on at once. So.
Right. So I won't be back till Saturday on the Pundit Roundup, and I won't be back until Monday on the show, and Netroots Nation will be over by the weekend. So I just want to acknowledge everybody there and have a great time, learn stuff,
I say,
and come back and organize.
Occupy it and keep it going until Monday. Occupy Netroots Nation, everybody.
Right, absolutely. Take care, and I'll talk to you next
too.
week.
All right, very good. Thanks, Greg. Wouldn't be a bad idea to occupy the place, because I think the next event coming in, maybe to the same convention center, after Netroots Nation packs up and leaves, is the ALEC convention, although, I'm not certain that they're using the same space. But if you, let's say, occupy New Orleans and make it impossible for the ALEC representatives to get there and draft up their bogus new laws, cookie-cutter laws, and pass them around for everyone to use and fail with, that might be a good thing. Hey, that makes for a transition, a sort of a segue, if you will, and transition, if you won't, to a story that I know is in pocket somewhere, but that I think I forgot to put aside in a way that would help me identify it when push came to shove, and that is now. Here we are, along with a couple of companion stories. There is a ProPublica piece that was recently published. Did I put aside the tweet too? No, I'll have to look for that one because there's some real interesting stuff. But a ProPublica piece that was published, yesterday? I think so. That was super interesting in that same vein of cookie-cutter laws that are terrible and very often don't stand up in court. And you probably have already guessed where I'm going with this one, but I'm wasting time now as I scroll back just a little further if I can. Let me see. I'm trying to find, I think it was Daniel, whose tweet I retweeted in order to get this ball rolling. But I want to find that tweet because, well, for one thing, it summarized the gist of the story very nicely. And two, the responses to his tweet contained some very important information about what was really going on here. Here we go. I think I'm getting back down to it. Here's our tweet from Daniel, as you know him on Twitter. Daniel Nichanian. Is that his last name? You know what? I've never used it for anything. Wow. Well, at any rate, sorry if I've massacred it. I'll give you the quick and dirty on it, the way he summarized it. What a story, in all caps. He writes, by ProPublica. Chris Kobach is the one we're talking about. Or does he say Kobach by any chance? You know him as the horrible human being from Kansas who, in addition to running for statewide office and being a national advocate, national activist for voter suppression, at one point headed up Donald Trump's proposed, I don't know what he called it, but, commission on, I think they called it Commission on Voter Integrity. It was basically a nationalized task force on voter suppression, a gang that he and Kobach got together to try to gather evidence and prove that millions and millions of illegal aliens were voting and swaying the elections, and we needed to have, the voter ID laws in order to weed out all the illegals who were voting in massive numbers. And then they were never able to prove that, more than 2 people nationally had done it in the last 10 years or whatever, some kind of crazy numbers. And everyone began to wonder, how come Mr. Harvard lawyer is losing all his cases in court? Well, here's Daniel's quick and dirty recap of what ProPublica has, and then we'll dive into what ProPublica has, and then we'll dive into the story behind the story. Kobach went around helping towns pass anti-immigration ordinances, and then got himself hired to defend them in court when they were inevitably sued because the laws were unconstitutional. Towns then spent millions on legal fees, faced a financial crisis, and usually lost, while Kobach earned $800,000 in legal fees. And remember, of course, when you lose that badly, you're very often paying the legal fees of the other side, too, not to mention the fines and things that go along with it. He grabs a particular screen or two of the hottest parts of the story, but we can take a look at the whole thing. It's not massive. We might as well take in the whole picture here. Jessica Huseman and Blake Patterson on the story for ProPublica, and Brian Lowry and Hunter Woodall for the Kansas City Star. The story filed yesterday, Chris Kobach's lucrative trail of courtroom defeats. And that little alarm going off in the background tells me you have no business starting a story like this. You have to be off the air for a minute, in a minute. So let's just get a little taste of what's going on here. The subheader tells us, for years, the candidate for Kansas governor, that's what Kobach is now, a candidate for governor of Kansas, has defended towns that passed anti-immigration ordinances. These towns have lost big, both in court and in money, but Kobach has fared considerably better. And it makes for very interesting reading, and as it turns out, it has made for an interesting story for a long time. That cryptic clue will be picked up on as part of the theme when we return in just a minute. Now is the chance for you to run to the refrigerator and get a snack for breakfast if you're listening along at Netroots Nation in New Orleans. Hi, how you doing? We'll be right back once you get a snack. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And time for us to continue with this story. Chris Kobach, extraordinary a-hole, as it says here, made a lucrative career for himself setting up towns across the country with very stupid and intrusive anti-immigrant laws, many of which did not withstand constitutional or otherwise did not withstand scrutiny in court. Lost, costing the town, in some cases, millions of dollars, but some portion of those millions of dollars finding their way mysteriously into Chris Kobach's pockets. Here's the story, published or co-published as between ProPublica and the Kansas City Star. Chris Kobach likes to tout his work for Valley Park, Missouri. No one knows why, but he does. He has boasted on cable TV about crafting and defending the town's hardline anti-immigration ordinance. He discussed his victory there at length on his old radio show. He still lists it on his resume, because who's looking, right? But victory isn't the word most Valley Park residents would use to describe the results of Kobach's work. With his help, the town of 7,000 passed an ordinance in 2006 that punished employers for hiring illegal immigrants. And that's not necessarily, the worst thing in the world, although, one, we fall into the language of using the words illegal immigrants for one thing. But for a long time, we've thought, even from a progressive standpoint, that maybe it was worth, at least taking out some of our anger, if there is any, among the economically anxious anyway. Some of our anger and frustration about the question of undocumented immigration, and say, instead of merely punishing the people who, after all, at bottom are, for the most part, just looking to build a decent life for themselves here in the United States and get along with their neighbors and provide for their families, etc. What about the employers who very cynically agree to employ them and then treat them as disposable commodities once they're busted and pay there are no consequences on the employers. There really ought to be. It's costless for them to not only continue to employ them, but to exploit them along the way. Give me back half the salary I pay you officially on the books, or if I pay you officially on the books at all, or I'll turn you in to the immigration authorities, etc. Anyway, as we were reading here, victory isn't the word most Valley Park residents would use to describe the results of Kobach's work. With his help, the town of 7,000 passed an ordinance in 2006 that punished employers for hiring illegal immigrants, but also this other important one that they replicated across the country, and also punished landlords for renting to them. But after 2 years of litigation and nearly $300,000 in expenses, the ordinance was largely gutted. Now it is illegal only to, quote, knowingly hire illegal immigrants, as the story reports there, something that was already illegal under federal law, by the way. Gee whiz, did you know that? What makes the immigrants illegal? That's part of it. The town's attorney can't recall a single case brought under the ordinance. In other words, there was not even a problem to begin with. Here's your opportunity to now bring a case against an employer or landlord who rents an apartment to or employs an undocumented immigrant. And we have to have this law because this is rampant all across America, even here in our small town, and that's why we need the law. Now, get to it and prosecute somebody. And they never do. What do you know? Ambulance chasing is how Grant Young, former mayor of Valley Park, describes Kobach's role. Young characterized Kobach's attitude as, let's find a town that has got some issue or pretends to have some issues. Let's drum up an immigration problem, and maybe I can advance my political position, my political thinking, and maybe even make some money at the same time. Kobach used his work in Valley Park to attract other clients, with sometimes disastrous effects on the municipalities. The towns, some with budgets in the single-digit millions, gasp, ran up hefty legal costs after hiring him to defend similar ordinances. Farmers Branch, Texas, such sweet, small-town sounding places, wound up owing $7 million in legal bills. Hazleton, Pennsylvania, at least that's how it's written, and I've always, is that Hazleton? I can't remember how they pronounce it there in Pennsylvania. Anyway, they took on a debt to pay $1.4 million and eventually had to file for a state bailout. In Fremont, Nebraska, the city raised property taxes to pay for Kobach's services. Chris Kobach, single-handedly raised taxes in Fremont, Nebraska. He's not even from Nebraska. None of the towns are currently enforcing the laws he helped craft, and that's largely because most of it is illegal anyway. This sounds a little bit to me like Harold Hill in The Music Man, said Larry Dessum, a law professor at the University of Missouri who focuses on legal ethics, and it probably sounded just the same to you, which we'll get back to, a point we'll return to in a few minutes. Got a problem here in River City, and we can solve it if you buy the band instruments from me. He's selling something that goes well beyond legal services. I mean, it is very interesting. He's selling you legal services, yes, but he's also selling you a legal problem which you'll need legal services for. There was no issue here, but he found a way to get you in trouble in litigation and then charge you for losing your litigation for you. What a scam. Kobach rode the attention the case has generated to political prominence, first as Kansas Secretary of State, and now as a candidate for governor in the Republican primary on August 7th. So on Tuesday, we'll find out if we can flush that piece of crap down the toilet, too. He also earned more than $800,000 for his immigration work, paid by both towns and an advocacy group over 13 years. Kobach's recent legal struggles have been widely reported. In June, a federal judge handed him a sweeping courtroom defeat, overturning a Kansas law that required proof of citizenship to register to vote. The judge went so far as to order him to attend 6 hours of continuing legal education after he repeatedly botched basic courtroom procedure. Another recent Kobach endeavor, a federal commission aimed at combating voter fraud, which he co-chaired, shut down after a bevy of lawsuits challenged it. And you may remember the stories we at least mentioned, if didn't read in their entirety. I think we actually gave it some considerable amount of time. That the judge in one of those cases actually fined him, not in addition to sending him to continuing legal education, fined him for misconduct. And then in a completely separate new round of corruption, he paid the fines basically with a stolen credit card, a stolen state credit card at that, and stole it off of a guy who was at that time deployed overseas as an active duty member of the military. That's like quadruply amazing. And I think I only cited 3 things individually wrong with that, but I'm sure there's another fourth one hidden there somewhere, so I just went right to the quadruple on that one. I quadrupled down on it. Kobach's failures in the courtroom date back far longer, by the way, Mr. Hotshot Lawyer. The investigation by ProPublica and the Kansas City Star shows that the towns Kobach represented, small, largely white, gee whiz, municipalities overwhelmed by real or perceived demographic shifts, were swayed by Kobach's message. An ordinance would solve their problem and could be easily defended in court. Based on public records requests filed in June with the towns that Kobach represented, this article for the first time details the costs to municipalities and the payments to Kobach for his lengthy local legal campaigns. And it may very well be true that those particular details are brand new to this investigation. When Kobach was hired by Farmers Branch in 2007, then Mayor Bob Phelps said Kobach cited his anticipated victory in Valley Park as a selling point. The city council, Phelps said, bought it hook, line, and sinker. Well, you shouldn't have. In Hazleton, Valley Park's results were cited as a reason for optimism. Both Kobach and Lou Barletta, then mayor of Hazleton and now the area's congressman, used the town as a reason to press on with their costly litigation. Why, Valley Park has a similar ordinance. It was modeled after ours. No, yours was modeled after theirs, dude. Barletta told maybe not. I don't know. Barletta told the local reporter at the time, maybe they just got sued first. They were also sued. They went to federal court and won. Neither he nor Kobach mentioned in the interview the Valley Park's ordinance ultimately looked very little like Hazleton's, and by the way, Valley Park lost. Albertville, Alabama chose to do a bit of homework on Kobach, and it paid off. Good for you. When Kobach arrived in town in March of 2010, he painted a bleak picture of its future. He said he'd been all over the country helping towns that were suffering from an influx of illegal immigrants. Albertville, he continued, was more afflicted than any he'd seen. He predicted it would collapse under the weight of the influx. Kobach said he could help them. As he'd done in Valley Park, Kobach said he would write an ordinance that would force the illegal immigrants to leave. There are certain things that cities can do to deal with the burden that illegal immigration imposes on the taxpayers. And the answer is increase the burden on the taxpayers and send the money to me. Well, that's not what he said out loud anyway, but there are things that cities can do, he told the municipal officials at a public meeting. He dismissed concerns over potential legal challenges and their high costs. The American Civil Liberties Union, he said, has a track record of losing cases like these. Albertville's government was poised to hire Kobach until a city council member made a call to Valley Park. Hello, Valley Park? Yes. Is he telling the truth? No. Oh. After hearing firsthand about the town's experience, Albertville's city council voted against bringing him on. The advice I have gotten from towns which passed similar resolutions said they would not do it again, Councilman Randy Amos said after the vote. Kobach says he warned the towns what they were getting into. The elected representatives of the people made a decision with full awareness that fighting the ACLU costs money. That, yeah, it was worth it to fight the ACLU and worth it to get these ordinances in place, he said. I believe in these cities and these ordinances and what they're doing. And so, if there was some way I could help them, I did. Some of Kobach's former clients, typically those most zealously opposed to immigration, speak highly of the work he did for them. It was honestly an honor to work with the guy, said former Valley Park City Attorney Eric Martin. He knew his subject matter and was very driven to get something passed. Phelps had a different view. It was a sham, he said of Kobach's pitch, which ultimately ended in a resounding defeat for Farmers Branch. He kept telling us, we can win this. We'll just keep appealing it, which I felt was very misleading, said Phelps. It was just a sad situation that we had to go through, and everybody now regrets it. In 2006, Hazleton's then Mayor Barletta, now a candidate for U.S. Senate, by the way, proclaimed that his town was facing a crisis. Hispanic residents, yikes, had ballooned from 5% of the population in 2000 to 30% in 2006. That is a lot of growth. And the town's employees were struggling to serve a Spanish-speaking community. Well, if you can't hack it in a free market, I don't know what to tell you. Scouring the internet for a solution, what would you even look up? Barletta happened on a failed city ordinance in San Bernardino, California. He largely copied it and proposed a law that would require employers to verify the citizenship of all employers and for landlords to do the same for renters. It also made English the official language of the town. Why not? I got an idea. Why don't we copy the failure of San Bernardino, California? All right, that sounds like a bad idea. Why copy a failure? National media flocked, and in one of the articles Barletta read, he saw the name of Kobach, whom he had never heard of. It was in USA Today, which I've never heard of. Barletta said in a recent interview, I think he said something like, the law is on their side. That was really the first time that I heard anybody say that I could actually do what I was doing. Sounds like Trump. He brought on Kobach to refine the Hazleton Ordinance and defend it in court. This would turn out to be a break for Kobach, who was then a law professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Now, Missouri is the other state on the other side of the line there from Kansas. At that point, he was a little-known anti-immigration crusader with modest press coverage whose modest press coverage had come largely during a failed congressional bid in 2004. Kobach's profile began to rise with the headlines sparked by the ordinances. Other municipalities called upon his expertise after seeing his name associated with Hazleton. He was even brought in to help Arizona craft SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law. Right? You remember that one if you, let's say, didn't attend Netroots Nation in Arizona that one year, probably as a result of that. Well, you remember that bill. It passed in 2010 before being largely overturned by the Supreme Court, which just brings us to another thread here, by the way. Chris Kobach considers himself a genius lawyer ahead of his time. The fact that he's losing case after case after case and costing his clients millions and millions and millions of dollars, bankrupting many of them as a result, is just another one of those cases of courts and liberal idiots being pre-wrong about things. And the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court will change everything. Everybody thought I was an idiot and I was wrong and I didn't know what I was talking about, to the extent that federal judges were making me go to continuing legal education classes and fining me for being so wrong about things. Well, what if we got a Supreme Court vote that was the fifth one we needed to say I was right? Not that the logic was undeniable and so therefore the law had to change, but that no logic at all was necessary. We simply needed 5 people who were willing, for no reason whatsoever, to say, yes, the unconstitutional is now constitutional. And you know how it is with those Supreme Court guys and their robes. No one can, gainsay their interpretation of what's constitutional, even if they are unable to articulate why it's unconstitutional. That's supposed to be a part of your decision, but it doesn't have to be. You can just say, it is what it is. And, that's the level that they're working at. And one day, I'm sure, his plan is, Chris Kobach, to laugh in all our faces about our having been pre-wrong this whole time, and all these embarrassing losses are really ultimately going to be an embarrassment for you. Because I'm going to see to it that we elect a guy who will put a puppet of his own, while even as he's puppet to Putin, on the Supreme Court, so that all of my mistakes can be erased. That's a very important point to keep in mind. Kobach became a regular presence, returning to the story, on conservative TV and talk radio, and in 2010 he bundled all of this into his first successful run for statewide office as Kansas's Secretary of State. 2 years later, while simultaneously defending cities and serving as an elected official, Kobach assumed his most prominent role yet, immigration advisor to presidential candidate Mitt Romney. His main contribution was the notion that immigrants should self-deport, and of course that was the thing about which Mitt Romney was perhaps most ridiculed. The idea was so widely panned that the Romney campaign distanced itself, labeling Kobach a supporter, not an advisor. But the election of Donald Trump gave traction to Kobach's immigration ideas, and he quickly became a favored expert, advising the White House on illegal immigration, non-citizen voter registration, and the 2020 census. Too dumb for Romney, not only right at home in the Trump campaign, but guess what? We're going to create a commission for you to do your work. And then he did it so poorly and was once again exposed as so dumb that he became too dumb for Trump as well, which is remarkable. Kobach's work for small cities was part of a mission he believed in, he said, and one that remains a top priority as he runs for governor. I go around the state. I perceive a lot of people want Kansas to stop giving handouts to illegal aliens. Nice catchphrase. So that's something I have expertise in. No, it isn't. And that is an issue on which I will deliver for the people. No, you won't. But in addition to his growing name recognition, Kobach's bank account also benefited from his immigration work. That is to say, not working at all. Records obtained by ProPublica and the Kansas City Star show that since 2005, Kobach has made at least $800,000 through his advocacy. At least $150,000 of that was paid during Kobach's time as Secretary of State. By the way, Kansas law permits government officials to moonlight, so good for you. Those dollar amounts are almost certainly an undercount. Valley Park, Farmers Branch, Fremont, and Hazleton provided financial documentation, but Maricopa County didn't. Given the minimum fees stipulated in his contract with Maricopa County, Kobach made at least $12,600, and it's likely he was paid far more. Both Hazleton and Valley Park said the cost of the trial was defrayed by donations. In other words, he got the, like LBJ said, he got the suckers to empty their pockets for him. Kobach was also paid by the Immigration Reform Law Institute and the Federation for American Immigration Reform, two arms of the same organization from 2005 to 2018. Federal forms show the organization paid Kobach a total of just over $125,000 in 2005 and 2007. Such organizations are not required, what do you know, to disclose annual payments of $50,000 or less, suggesting he received smaller amounts in other years. Kobach declined to estimate how much money he has made from doing immigration work, but said $150,000 during his time in office sounds probably pretty close. Kansas City law requires elected officials to disclose their business interests, but not the total dollar amounts that they've earned. Well, gee whiz. In 2014, when Kobach ran for re-election as Secretary of State, both his Democratic and Republican challengers needled him about his outside consulting and attorney gigs, arguing the state deserved a full-time Secretary of State for the $86,000 a year salary he's paid. Around that time, Kobach's disclosure forms began showing fewer and fewer clients. The form filed in the spring of 2014 at the height of the campaign listed only Fremont, though other records show he was paid more than $40,000 by the city of Hazleton and more than $12,000 by Farmers Branch. The next year, he again disclosed only Fremont, despite being paid $5,500 by Hazleton and $3,650 by Farmers Branch. The forms filed in 2017 and 18 included none of these clients, though each year he was paid a $10,000 retainer by Fremont. Kobach defended the change in disclosure, saying how he listed the work depends on whether the check was written to me personally or written to Kobach Law LLC. You see? LLC, alert. If it goes to the Kobach Law LLC, then the source of income is Kobach Law LLC, not these other towns, right? If it's written to me personally, then it would be listed as a separate line item. Kansas's rules do not allow the apparent loophole. Attorneys do not have to, they do allow the apparent loophole. Attorneys do not have to disclose any clients who pay them through an LLC. According to the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission, but Carol Williams, who led the agency from 1981 to 2017, that's some experience, said the officials have an obligation to disclose money they receive directly from municipalities. Kobach's municipal clients all paid him personally, with the exception of Hazleton, which directed checks to his LLC. Kobach did not say why he stopped disclosing the payments from Hazleton, but you could probably guess. Valley Park had hardly any immigrants to speak of, by the way, at the time Kobach was called in. The town's Hispanic population had ticked up from 2% of the population to around, anyone want to hazard a guess? That's right, 3% in 2006. Well, that amounted to an increase of about 50 people in a town of 7,000. But that was enough for the town's then mayor, Jeff Whitaker. He took to local media to fulminate about overcrowding. Overcrowding. You got one guy and his wife that settle down here, have a couple of kids, and before long you have cousin Puerto Rico and Taco whoever moving in. Oh my God! Ugh, my heart hurts to read that. I mean, what a... Oh, my God. Should punch that guy in the face. You imagine that? Okay. 50 additional people have moved in over the course of what? I don't even know how many years. But even if it's one day. For like you got cousin Puerto Rico and Taco, whoever. What a racist. Well, that apparently, comment made to the Riverfront Times, if you want to verify that for yourself, it's linked in here. He championed, and you really shouldn't be able to use a word like champion when you're a person like that. He championed an immigration ordinance and advocated hiring Kobach. Valley Park and Hazleton both passed ordinances within days of each other in July 2006. The ACLU warned both towns that they'd face lawsuits if the ordinances passed, and the organization quickly followed through on the threat. Hazleton lost decisively. The city of fewer than 30,000 people was defeated both at the trial court level and on appeal. Don't worry, we'll appeal. You lost the appeal too. Don't worry. I'll put someone else on the Supreme Court and then we won't lose anymore. We'll cheat. Well, its ordinance never went into effect, but he got paid for it, and on retainer too. Even then, Kobach maintained a serene confidence because he knew he was going to cheat eventually. By 2013, 7 years into the litigation, a privately raised legal defense fund that he had paid Hazleton's bills, including $250,000 for Kobach's fees, and by that point, that private foundation then runs dry. The U.S. Supreme Court had declined to hear the city's case. The ACLU had asked an appeals court to order Hazleton to reimburse it for $2.4 million in attorney's fees. Despite that, Kobach told the Hazleton paper, the Standard Speaker, that the city shouldn't expect many more substantial legal bills. At this stage of the game, costs are much lower for both sides. Both sides, he said, adding that they are minuscule costs as opposed to costs at the front end of a lawsuit. That may have been true to the extent that he was describing his own fees, but a year later, Hazleton was ordered to pay the ACLU $1.4 million to cover its attorney's fees. At the time, the town was already $6 million in debt. It was forced to take on additional loans to pay those bills. By the end, in March of 2015, Kobach acknowledged that Hazleton was in financial distress. In a court filing, he told the judge the city simply could not afford to pay the ACLU's fees. An award of the full amount of fees and costs sought by the plaintiffs, or even half that amount, in one lump sum, would likely be the straw that breaks the camel's back and drives the city into bankruptcy and Act 47 receivership, he wrote, mentioning the process in Pennsylvania that allows the state to take over the finances of insolvent towns. The judge rejected the plea. Municipalities, regardless of their fiscal health, have no discretion to enact improper laws, he wrote. Hazleton was finally declared financially distressed in September of 2017 by the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development and entered into a recovery plan with the state. City officials deny that the $1.4 million payment to the ACLU forced their hand, but it did. But it was a significant sum for a municipality that in 2017 took in $9.5 million in revenue. The legal process would have been far shorter and less costly if Kobach hadn't insisted on rewriting the ordinances during the litigation, said Omar Jadwat, who heads the ACLU's immigration project. It confused the parties and slowed the process, Jadwat said, asserting that the purpose was to iterate through different versions and try and find something that could stick. Kobach, he contended, was looking at these municipalities as kinds of laboratories for his experiment in policymaking, and he ran up a lot of bills in the process. Kobach oversaw 2 revisions in the law in Hazleton while the suit was pending. In Valley Park, too, Kobach overhauled the ordinance during the litigation. The once broad measure was narrowed to prohibit knowingly hiring illegal immigrants, something that was already banned by federal law. And that's part of the problem right there. Tim Engelmeyer, who became Valley Park city prosecutor in 2006, said he doesn't remember anyone ever being charged even after the statute was pared back. I'm not sure if anybody was even cited. Said Engelmeyer, who is now also the city attorney, so he'd be in a position to know about that. Kobach said the decision to jettison part of the ordinance was a tactical decision, and he claims that the case was a win. just like Donald Trump in that respect. Hey, it was a David and Goliath fight, and that's never pleasant if you're on the side that doesn't have as many resources, but we won, and it was a great victory for the city of Valley Park, he said. Kobach said the lack of citations isn't proof that the case was fruitless. Quite the contrary, it means that the ordinance is working because people are complying with it, he said. That is some spin, man. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with ProPublica's coverage, along with the Kansas City Star, of just how Chris Kobach has been scamming his way across the country, draining the coffers of small towns along the way in his insane crusade against all odds and against the Supreme Court of the United States itself, trying to force through all sorts of anti-immigration policies that end up flopping and costing cities millions in attorney's fees and fines. But he don't care because he's figuring that eventually they'll get enough Trump conservatives on the Supreme Court that it won't matter that he was wrong in the past. It'll all be undone for him, and he'll win a tremendous victory and laugh in all of your faces like the troll he is. And you know what? They're one confirmation away from being able to do it. But how do you like that spin he puts on it? The loss in Valley Park was actually a win because, after all, there were no prosecutions brought under the law. Not that doesn't mean, as in his view, that the law was obviously unnecessary. Instead, it means people were so scared of being caught on the wrong side of this powerful law that they immediately self-deported themselves or got themselves out of the business of renting to or employing illegal immigrants rather than face the wrath of the long arm of the law, which was losing left and right in every court in which it appeared. That's his spin. How do you like that? Well, like Hazleton, Farmers Branch also lost in trial court and on appeal. What do you know? Batting 1,000. The process took, again, nearly 7 years, just like the other guys, and the city spent almost $7 million. It hired an expensive Dallas-based litigation firm, which then, you think that Kobach lost out on that one? It expired a Dallas-based litigation firm. Well, at least Kobach didn't get the money. Wait, yes, he did, because they then hired Kobach as a contractor, paying him nearly $190,000, more than $44,000 of it after he became Kansas Secretary of State. And guess what? Its ordinance was never enacted either. Well, we didn't have $7 million sitting around to just blow. We had to take it out of our budget, said Phelps. We were doing streets, we were doing parks, we were doing infrastructure. You know about Infrastructure Week. Infrastructure for commercial properties, and we had to just cease all of that and cut it back. People lost jobs to this bum. On the surface, Kobach's results appear better in Fremont, Nebraska. The city council there had rejected a similar ordinance in 2008 over fear of litigation. Smart. But the idea of an anti-immigration law was revived in 2010. Dumb. And 57% of the town voted it in as a ballot measure. The town banned landlords from renting to anyone in the country illegally and required renters to provide specific information to the police and obtain $5 occupancy licenses. The ordinance also forced city businesses to use a federal database to check the immigration status of all employees. The town hired Kobach to defend the new law, which he'd had a hand in writing. He was the author. Who better? Said Mayor Scott Getchman, who had opposed the ordinance as a member of the city council. Fremont won the right to ban undocumented immigrants from rental housing, although the provisions requiring employers to verify the status of employees were removed from the law. Yeah, don't hurt the businesses, of course. But shortly after the city's victory in 2014, officials realized the law was toothless. It's toothless, everybody. The rental application wording written by Kobach and approved by the court did not require the necessary information to determine citizenship status. It was just, your name's Rodriguez, you're out of here. The law remains unenforceable. Fremont continues to retain Kobach in a new case, or rather in case new litigation arises. Can you believe that? In case we need to lose a case, we want you around. He has been paid more than $100,000 so far, and per his contract will continue to be paid a $10,000 annual retainer. Getchman says the town will reconsider its agreement if Kobach is elected governor in the fall. Why? Kobach himself said he has not yet decided what he'll do if elected. I don't know, we'll have to weigh it then, he said. Obviously, as governor, I would not have the same number of hours of free time that I do as Secretary of State. Oh, don't admit that. I'll be reducing my lawyer work, the law work, considerably. That's why you're the judge and I'm the law-talking guy. Kobach dismissed the idea that the heavy spending conflicted with his campaign stance as a small government conservative. Of course, if you are a small government conservative, you have to acknowledge the fact that illegal immigration results in a burden on taxpayers. It does now, Kobach said. So it is entirely consistent, in fact. If you weren't concerned about illegal immigration, then I would say you are not a particularly effective small government conservative because illegal immigration adds a massive burden to government. Except it doesn't. Former Valley Park Mayor Whitaker said Kobach, unbelievably, was, quote, worth every penny. Others disagreed. Whitaker was voted out of office in 2008, so I guess everybody disagreed, a year before the lawsuit was finalized. Amid controversy over the city's spending on this lawsuit. He sees Valley Park as ahead of its time, and I'm afraid that Kobach does too. Where was Donald Trump 10 years ago, Whitaker said. I think Valley Park was 10 years ahead of its time on that issue. Barletta, Hazleton's mayor-turned-congressman, said the city was facing a crisis at the time, and though the litigation was ultimately unsuccessful, desperate times called for desperate measures. Tom Gabos, a former Hazleton city council member, thinks that Kobach and Barletta took advantage of the town's tenuous position for their own gain. The whole thing just strikes me now, I realize, as a stepping stone for Lou Barletta to better himself, Gabos said, and probably for Kobach, too. The two would be reversed in order if he were a little more centrally located, let's say, within the American continent. If he were closer to Kansas, he'd probably think of Kobach first. So, just hearkening back to where all this came from, I mentioned to you that it came from one of Taniel's tweets, and that Taniel's tweets, the responses to that tweet, were very interesting in themselves, and I mentioned something along the way on who reported what when. Well, guess what? Okay, ProPublica and Kansas City Star weren't first to this story. And though they added some additional information, it was reported on earlier, and in the responses to Daniel's tweet, I didn't have to go far before I dug up this tweet from Jessica Kia, spelled like the car company. Are you the owner of Kia automobiles? Very good. Lucky for you. Jessica Kia, let's see, where's she from? Does it tell us, like, where? District 11 committee rep. Oh, how do you like that? For Somerset, New Jersey Dems. Excellent. Good work. You are a very brave person, Jessica. I try not to get involved at that level. Sometimes it's just too damn frustrating, but you're doing the Flying Spaghetti Monsters work there in Somerset County. Thanks for doing it. And you're doing us a favor here, too, pointing out, once again, the comedians and the alumni of The Daily Show. Thanks very much, Liz Winstead, who sometimes gets somehow left out of the credit for the genius that is The Daily Show. I mean, obviously, Jon Stewart owns a lot of that credit, too, plus the other writers who have been fantastic for a decade plus on the thing. But, you know, hey, this was actually like partly her idea, and she's the co-creator of The Daily Show. And I just recently saw, I think, somewhere, some controversy and a big write-up of how successful The Daily Show and all of its alumni had been, and left her out of it somehow. Well, anyway, this time it's Samantha Bee, now out on her own in her own show, The Full Frontal, with Samantha Bee show. And guess what? She reported this story, and she reported it just the way, really, it was dying to be reported, as a parody of The Music Man. And there's a great clip, and I can't play the whole thing because it would totally be a violation of copyright. But it's well done and beautifully put together and funny, in case you were wondering. That's the main purpose of the whole thing. And she did it a full year ago. And there's a nice tweet here included in Jessica's tweet. Did I forget your name already? Did I get it wrong? No, Jessica Kia. That's right. This tweet from, let's see if I can bring it up without starting the music and audio here. Yeah, August 3rd, a year ago tomorrow. Full Frontal's account tweeted out, "Join Chris Kobach as he travels from town to town, bringing bankruptcy, racism, and music." And somehow sexy Hamilton Jay Munoz actor is there too, and he joins in the fun, putting together the spoof of The Music Man, and it's well done. And I think the lyrics are fun and interesting, and I encourage you to take a listen. But good, credit where credit is due. There, it's sometimes amazing how the comedians see it first. And a little bit like, I wouldn't say we're comedians here, and we, of course, always credit our ability to see things first to the newspaper articles that we are able to read in it through the expertise of the actual journalists who cover these things, and I'm sure the story is pretty much the same there. But amazingly, this went almost a year without widespread notice. But look, I'm glad everybody had a part in this. Sam B's coverage of it is much more entertaining and fun than the very dry ProPublica Kansas City Star coverage, but that's the kind of coverage you need to get it taken seriously, and these things move in stages, and we understand that. Well done on everybody's part, although a hat tip to Sam B would be nice, and Sam B would likely in turn tip her hat to the journalists who tipped off her writers about this story, but they certainly gave it the correct spin. Well done there, and I'm glad to be able to report that to be the case. Don't know exactly which direction to turn at this point, because there's two themes that I would like to pick up on, one of which we can perhaps incorporate by reference. Well, both of which we could incorporate. You can incorporate anything by reference, but this story reminded me of a couple of things. Not least of which, though the one, this will get the lesser of the attention today, was, do you remember, we covered this is why I say we can incorporate by reference. Years ago, we covered the story of, which one was it? And I think I have a follow-up story that I could share with you that's not too long, that kind of gives you the gist of it. Was it Jefferson County? Yeah, Jefferson County, Alabama. Here's the similarity, I guess, to what Kobach is doing. It's not as ideologically driven, well, maybe it is. I mean, I guess it depends what you think of as the ideology here. Here's a follow-up article on the story as we shared it way back when in the New York Times. Mary Williams Walsh. Is this the follow-up? No, it isn't. Maybe this is the setup story from February 18th of 2012. Title of the piece is, "In Alabama, a county that fell off the financial cliff." Remember, we were all talking about financial cliffs at the time and super committees. That was the very hot topic. But I guess here's the follow-up piece, maybe be a little bit shorter, in Alabama papers from, let's see, which paper was publishing this? Well, it's down at Alabama, al.com, and not always can you tell which Alabama paper from the consortium this one came from. But this is a December 2014 piece. 1 year ago, Jefferson County emerged from bankruptcy. And they asked the question up front, did Wall Street fleece the county commission? This may sum things up somewhat more quickly and probably remind you of the story and shorten this detour, if you will. Barnett Wright, writing up this piece, dateline from Birmingham. 1 year ago today, Jefferson County, and I think Birmingham is in Jefferson County. Jefferson County emerged from bankruptcy after closing on about $1.8 billion in new sewer warrants used to pay creditors, bonds, essentially. The exit came approximately 2 years after filing a $4.23 billion bankruptcy in November of 2011, which was the largest by a U.S. city or county until it was overtaken in July of 2013 by Detroit's $18 billion case. The county's exit appeared to end one of the largest municipal filings in history, but this week a federal judge allowed appeals to continue, meaning many more years in courts and millions in legal fees are likely. A group of ratepayers argue that the deal heavily favored Wall Street bankers and rate increases scheduled for the next 40 years to repay sewer creditors are onerous. County officials countered that the settlement with J.P. Morgan Chase and Company, hedge funds, and bond insurers reduced the county's $3.2 billion sewer debt by $1.4 billion, a huge savings. Well, here's a look at the case from beginning to the most recent developments. And think about what's happening here. I bet you didn't know, if you didn't know about this story, that hedge fund types were making millions in sewer construction in Alabama. You thought it was all glamorous stuff. So, what did the bankruptcy exit settlement detail is covered in here? What impact did the settlement have on sewer rates? That's all very interesting, too. How long did it take to reach an agreement? Any unusual aspects to this settlement? Did they get right around to what actually happened in all of this? How did all of this begin? Let's take a look at this. The case can be traced to an aging sewage system that federal regulators ordered to be fixed in the 1990s. Okay. To pay for the repairs, Jefferson County began borrowing money and refinancing old debt, issuing more than $3 billion in warrants, again, bonds, and interest rate swaps, by 2003. In early 2008, the county's $3.2 billion of variable and auction rate sewer warrants collapsed, along with associated interest rate swaps when liquidity in the bond market dried up amid the global financial crisis. The county subsequently lost its legal battles to retain a state-approved occupational license that provided major support for the county's general fund. When state lawmakers refused to help by approving a replacement revenue stream, the county ran out of liquidity in late 2011 and was forced into bankruptcy with a total of $4.23 billion in long-term debt. What about corruption associated with the case? The next section asks, and this isn't giving great detail, it's just an overview of what happened. Nearly 24 elected officials, contractors, county employees, and bankers involved in the sewer bond deals went to jail for bribery and fraud. And that is a linked bit, and we should take a look at that because that's the interesting part, especially when you look at who went to jail. Prison looms for Jefferson County sewer defendants. Former Jefferson County Commissioner Chris McNair, we're looking at a 2010 article here, and 5 others convicted in the Jefferson County sewer scandal soon could have to report to prison after a federal appeals court recently denied their request for rehearing. The final shot at an appeal will be before the U.S. Supreme Court, which first will have to decide whether to review the cases. And in the meantime, most of the defendants have asked judges to remain free on bond while they wait to see if the Supreme Court will hear the cases. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals had affirmed the convictions of the 6 men and 3 companies in May, and a brief order issued July 20th denied their request for a rehearing. The court on July 30th, and again this is 2010, denied their request for a stay of the order while they appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Besides McNair, the others denied a rehearing by the appeals court were Jack W. Swan, former director of the Jefferson County Environmental Services Division, and contractors Bobby Rast, Danny Rast, Floyd W. Pat Doherty, and Grady Roland Pugh Sr. So what happened here is the big question. Let's see. And for this, we might perhaps jump back to the New York Times article and see if they will give us a quick overview. You know, the people down there in Alabama very close to the story, focusing on some of the other details. Let's take a look at it. Alabama, the county that fell off the financial cliff. That's the Mary Williams Walsh piece. One county jail here, down in Alabama, is so crowded that some inmates sleep on the floor, while another county jail a few miles down the road sits empty. There's no money for the second one anymore. The county roads here need paving, and the tax collector needs help. There's no money for them either. There's no money for a lot of things around here, not since Jefferson County, population 658,000, went bankrupt last fall. Remember, this is 2012. There is no money for holiday DUI checkpoints. litter patrols, or overtime pay at the courthouse. None for crews to pull weeds or pick up roadkill, not even when, as happened recently, an unlucky cow was hit near the town of Wylam. We don't do that anymore. E. Wayne Sullivan, director of Roads and Transportation Department, said of such roadside cleanup, "This is life today in Jefferson County, bankrupt USA. For all the talk in Washington about taxes and deficits, here is a place where government finances and government itself have simply broken down. The county, which includes the city of Birmingham, is drowning under $4 billion in debt, the legacy of a big sewer project and corrupt financial dealings that sent 17 people to prison." If you want to take a broad view, the trouble really began with the Constitutional Convention of the state of Alabama in 1901. It's pretty broad. The document that emerged there, written to empower business interests and disenfranchise African Americans and poor whites, gives towns and counties little authority over local issues. Local taxing power rests with the state, though lawmakers are loath to wield it today in an age of anti-tax populism. Last summer, the Supreme Court of Alabama struck down a tax that was a crucial source of revenue for Jefferson County, finally pushing the county over the brink. Officials here have only begun to grapple with the implications of life under Chapter 9 of the Federal Bankruptcy Code, a municipal form of debt adjustment, rather than reorganization or liquidation. Until now, the most famous example was Orange County, California, which filed for Chapter 9 in 1994 after risky investments went horribly wrong. Many local governments are struggling to pay their bills these days, but hardly any have filed for bankruptcy. And there were some notable exceptions listed there. Harrisburg, capital of Pennsylvania, Vallejo, California, and Central Falls, Rhode Island. Rhode Island making it back into the news. "This is really a journey without a roadmap," said John S. Young, the civil engineer who was appointed by an Alabama court to figure out how to fix Jefferson County's sewer system. Today he is that project's official receiver in name only. A federal bankruptcy court has suspended his powers, ruling that the federal bankruptcy law trumps state laws that protect bondholders. See what's going on here? In late 2010, we're going to jump forward to this, a Wall Street analyst, Meredith Whitney, caused a stir during an appearance on 60 Minutes. The $4 trillion market for municipal bonds, Ms. Whitney said, was headed for trouble. Within 12 months, 50 to 100 sizable defaults, possibly more, would rattle the market, she predicted. The reaction was stunning. In a blink, billions of dollars flew out of the muni market. Mutual funds that specialized in such bonds were hit especially hard. Ms. Whitney's prediction hasn't come to pass, and the muni market, usually as a dull as dishwasher corner of Wall Street, has since recovered. Many muni experts called Ms. Whitney an alarmist, but she clearly touched a nerve. States, counties, cities, and towns would issue many billions of dollars worth of new munis every year, and those bonds pay for all sorts of things. Government bodies nationwide can borrow those billions at a low cost because munis are traditionally considered among the most conservative of investments. Without quick and easy access to this market, local governments, as we know it, would fall apart. And that's why the developments in Jefferson County are so unnerving. About 300 municipalities nationwide are in default on their debt, but most of them are so tiny that they draw little attention. What's more, after New York City ran into financial trouble in the 70s and Cleveland fell into a hole in the 80s, the federal bankruptcy code was changed to ensure that certain types of muni bonds would keep paying interest and principal even if the issuing government sought bankruptcy. So, okay, some changes in the way things are going here. But we'll try our best to make long story short, though. The details in this are really important, and I really would love to share them all with you. So I would suggest that you read through the article itself. Basically, if you remember our coverage of it from years ago, the idea was, look, they had to fix their sewer system. They needed to borrow money to do it. In came the bond brokers from Wall Street, and they said, sure, we can help you, Jefferson County, Alabama. You need about $1 billion to fix up your sewer system. But I'll tell you what. Why don't you look to the future? Why don't you build out a sewer system that will handle any unforeseen growth into the future? Why? I assure you Jefferson County could be the biggest name in expansion and business and blah, 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 and, in all of America. I don't know how they convinced them to do it. But they ended up convincing them to buy a sewer system or to finance a sewer system many, many, many times larger than what they needed. And that sounds like it might be good planning if you could get it for a good deal. But, of course, it was also many, many, many more times the money that needed to be borrowed. In other words, what happened was Wall Street bond brokers showed up, sold them a bill of goods, and told them to buy a $3 or $4 billion sewer system be above and beyond the $1 billion one that they actually needed to be in, not only in compliance with the law, but in compliance well into the future. But why not look even further into the future? And by the way, if a bond broker closes a deal on a $1 billion deal, he makes X amount of money. And if he closes a deal on a $3 to $4 billion bond issue, he makes 3 to 4 times X amount of money. Yes? Well, how do you convince people to spend considerably more than they really need? Well, there are a couple ways. One, you could just simply talk them into it. But if that doesn't work, one thing you could do is say, I'm an extraordinarily wealthy person from having closed big deals like this in the past. I have lots of access to lots of capital. How about if I kick back some of that money to you and bribe you? If I said you're going to sign your county on to 3 or 4 times the debt it actually arguably needed to take on, that would be a problem. But what about if you got a part of that money for yourself and you got to be rich? Well, that might change your mind. And in fact, it did change minds. And they voted to take on this debt. And guess what? Wall Street guys took huge commissions. And the people who agreed to take on this debt went to prison. That's weird. And it bankrupted the city. And like we note in the story, it has happened in all sorts of places and has continued to happen since. And it's I just was reminded of it by this Chris Kobach story. Now, there's another angle to this whole story, which I probably have since run out of time to share with you. Maybe we'll make it a part of our Friday show, though we also have to catch up on the Middle East in the Friday show. But I assure you, it will resonate with you and is a very, very, very important progressive political message going into the midterm elections and beyond. And those of you who are down there at Netroots Nation in New Orleans might very well be interested then in tuning in to the show tomorrow and needling me to remember to share with you this different thread that grew out of the Chris Kobach story. But I think those of you who may happen to follow me on Twitter probably, maybe you may even have guessed exactly what I'm talking about when I was hinting to you that Chris Kobach likely believes that he's still right in all this, though every court he has faced in his fight has told him he is wrong. You're all wrong. You're all pre-wrong. You just don't know it yet. One day, we're going to get that 5th vote on the Supreme Court. And it won't matter whether it makes any goddamn sense or not. You will all be declared wrong, and I will be declared right, and I will laugh in your face. And who knows what else I'll do after I laugh in your face. Maybe, just maybe, I'll start imprisoning several of you. That doesn't make any goddamn sense, right? On what grounds? You know what? On FU grounds. On whatever grounds I feel like, because I have 5 dupes on the Supreme Court who are willing, in their robes, to say it's okay to put you in Guantanamo or anywhere else. On what grounds? On the grounds that there's no appeal from this court. That's what grounds. Now, do we know for sure that he has this in mind? No, we don't. But it's a pretty good guess, and I will share with you why I came to that conclusion. Not today. I'll share it tomorrow. But it isn't today that I came to that conclusion either. And part of the discussion will be how long ago and on what basis I did come to that conclusion. It's been a long time. It's coming up on a decade, as a matter of fact. And maybe tomorrow we can share some of this and all the other crazy news developing along the way, and hopefully get an update on just what the hell's going on down there. Perhaps from Armando, if he ever stops running, whatever he's doing down there. And it's awfully difficult to stop the festivities and take a moment to recap them. You just need to live in the moment when you're down there at Netroots Nation. I understand the feeling, and I miss it terribly. Okay, I'll tell you what you can do with the rest of your day if you're still not ready to get up and attend the panels, or even if you are, but you have got headphones or earbuds so that you can listen along with the panel and not disturb your neighbors. I can tell you what's up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam, still on the West Coast and punching the buttons despite the presence of other Netroots Radio folks down there at Netroots Nation. You get the The familial resemblance, Netroots, get the idea? Okay. West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's got these stories and more for you next, starting off in the Bistro Cafe. Sarah Huckabee Sanders shrugging off the hate and aggression shown towards the media, and Jim Acosta in particular, at Trump's Hours of Hate rally was vile. Then, on the rest of the menu, newly released documents reveal the Memphis police have been illegally spying, you won't believe it, on Black Lives Matter activists. Golly. Trump's voter suppression guru, Chris Kobach. Hey, guess what? He made big bucks by ripping off small towns. Where have you heard that before? Where will you hear more about it? And it's always good to have another angle on everything. Stay tuned for Justice's angle next, plus much more. Also, for almost 18 years, a Tokyo medical school altered admission test scores to keep women out. Why would they be doing that? After their break, they'll move on to the chef's table, where Congress passed a bill forcing tech companies to disclose foreign software probes. That's a good idea. And who says collusion's a crime? Why, the Department of Justice does, of course.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, thanks very much for listening. And again, do stay tuned. Chef de Cuisine Justice Putnam explains all of the priors and more, and anything else we can come up with. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, hopefully with an update from Armando about what he's running from and down there at Netroots Nation. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.